Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange. Today I want to do another round of recent reads talking about the horror books I have been consuming recently. And I have some great books to talk about as always, so let's get started. First, I want to talk about The Running Man by Richard Bachman, who of course is Stephen King. And I read this dystopian on audio and really enjoyed it. This is, as I mentioned, a dystopian that is set in a future where there is pollution and poverty, and it particularly follows one man who is quite poor himself and trying to take care of his sick infant daughter, but he needs money for medicine, and so in order to get that money, he agrees to go on a game show called The Running Man, where he has the opportunity to potentially get quite a bit of money, but in order to get that prize, he needs to survive for 30 days while men are hunting him down to kill him, and he is basically running for his life. I originally thought that premise sounded pretty far-fetched, which is why I haven't picked up this book sooner, but it was available, as I mentioned, on audio, and I did check it out and got really immersed in the story. I was quite impressed by Stephen King's ability to predict a future that felt very possible. I feel like, given the current nature of the world today, this future could happen, which is absolutely terrifying. As well, I thought it was interesting that while this is called a game show, it's basically reality TV, and King was able to predict reality TV that really preys on those people that are in difficult situations, that are desperate for money, and really use them in these terrible ways for entertainment. And I thought that was super interesting. The main character had handlers, and all those things that you see in reality TV was part of this book, and I just thought it was just really creative. So I would definitely recommend that one. I thought it was action-packed and gripping. It certainly is a darker story, and as I mentioned, it's more dystopian than straight-up horror, but I thought it was a really good read, and I definitely want to check out more of the Bachman books. Then I went on to listen to another Stephen King audiobook, and that is The Girl That Loved Tom Gordon. This is about a 9-year-old girl who goes hiking in the Appalachian Trail with her mother and brother, and she wanders off the path and gets lost. And the story follows her in the coming days as she is trying to survive and of course get back to civilization. While I'm putting this in this video, I wouldn't actually call this horror. It's more of a slow, suspenseful survival story, and is quite different than some of his other work. I don't think the characters were quite as strong as I often would expect from King. I didn't feel like the 9-year-old girl really felt like a 9-year-old girl. In a lot of ways, she seemed aware of things that a 9-year-old just wouldn't be thinking about or just be aware of. And the story gets its title from the fact that while she is wandering around, she has a radio with her and is listening to baseball games. She loves the pitcher Tom Gordon, and he really keeps her company throughout this time, and she starts to even imagine that he is there with her. So this book, I've heard other people describe it as creepy, but I would not call it creepy. It's, again, more just a story of watching this girl go through this situation. And it's probably not the strongest of Stephen King's books, but I did enjoy the audiobook experience and was very gripped into the story when I was reading it. And it is quite short for a Stephen King book, which you'll notice tends to be my preference. I do find that I connect better to his shorter stories, and this one definitely worked for me. So again, I would recommend it. Switching it up to a piece of young adult horror. Don't worry, I'm not just reading Stephen King these days. I also read a book called The Last Harvest by Kim Liggett, and this is a story set in a small town where a teenage boy a year ago went into the barn and found his father bleeding to death, and before he died he told his son, "I plead the blood." Now a year later, the son has taken on the role as the man of the house. He is responsible for harvesting the crop before the frost comes, and in doing so he has given up a lot of his friends and his activities like football. And the story gets creepy because soon enough the boy starts to possibly imagine things. He sees a calf that has been slaughtered, and he's not sure if he actually saw it or if he's simply imagining things, and he begins to wonder if he's possibly crazy, which you know is something I love reading in horror. And this comes from the fact that his own father was potentially going crazy before he died. You find out that he was possibly on meth, possibly schizophrenic, and basically was going around and murdering all the cows in the area and babbling on with biblical verses, and you just don't know what he was up to before he died. And of course the story is about the son unraveling what was happening with his father, and this is a story that is full of town secrets and you find out that there is a history to this town. There are generations of traditions with founding fathers, and I find myself really enjoying occult horror, which this does fall underneath, and I just got really gripped into the story. If I had one complaint, it's the fact that it is a young adult novel, which means that it has young adult tropes, and so I was really frustrated that while all these creepy things were happening, the main character was very distracted by a girl, and basically the romance at times superseded the horror aspects, which is such a pet peeve of mine. So I would recommend this one. I really still liked it, but you need to be okay with dealing with those young adult tropes. If that isn't something that bothers you, great. If it's something you can't stand, this one might not be for you. But other than that, it was a great read. Because of the football and harvesting, this book would be excellent to read during the fall season, and I would definitely recommend it again to the right audience. After that, I read a novella, and that was Halloween Fiend by C.V. Hunt. This is quite short. It's only about 100 pages. It's set in a small town where there is a creature called Halloween that goes around causing havoc and basically haunting the town. Every night he goes door to door asking for treats, just like on Halloween, and the town has to appease him by feeding him animals in order to survive. The story is told from a young person's perspective as he is dealing with this creature and gets to see how it affects the town. I expected this to be more of a creature horror story, but I would actually say it's more predominantly a small town with secrets kind of book, because again, it more deals with how the town is reacting to the creature than the creature himself. When we finally did get to see him, I did find the creature really creepy. I did like those aspects quite a bit, and it did have a good climax. So for its length, I definitely would recommend it if it's the kind of book that you would enjoy. It is very slow paced and did take a while to build. I found it actually fairly slow considering how short it is, so keep that in mind. But note that with that synopsis, there is harm to animals in this book. I know a lot of horror readers can read all kinds of gore to people, but when it comes to animals, you're more sensitive. So if you are uncomfortable with that harm to animals aspect, you might want to steer clear of this one. It definitely is a major part of the story. Otherwise, I would recommend it if that's not an issue for you. And finally, it wouldn't be a round of recent reads if I didn't talk about Junji Ito. I'm sorry, but I'm reading him, so I might as well talk about him. And I finished another one of short stories collections, and that was Fragments of Horror, which I did enjoy. I liked that this particular collection felt like it was themed around Japanese horror and Japanese themes of spirits and haunted houses, which are two very prevalent concepts in their culture surrounding the horror genre. And I definitely appreciated that. Considering it is translated horror, I really do like to read about other perspectives on horror. And of course, my favorite story in the collection was all about dissection. There was a woman who was obsessed with being dissected, and you know me, there's body horror in that, so I really enjoyed that one and it was a lot of fun. So if you're looking for something to check out by Junji Ito that you haven't yet read, I would recommend this one. I probably wouldn't start there, but it's definitely one of his best collections. So that is it for this video. As always, I'd love to know if you're planning on picking up any of the books I mentioned here. Again, I'm still obviously reading through Stephen King's books, so I would love more recommendations on what I should read from here. I am interested in reading more of the Bachman books. Like I mentioned, I've already read Thinner, and of course now The Running Man, so what should I read next by him? Don't worry, I'm always still reading plenty of other things, so I'd love to know what you're reading in terms of horror. Give me any recommendations, and I will talk to you again soon. Thanks for watching. Okay, bye.